Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Jennifer and you are listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. Today, we will be discussing recovery, the meaning of enmeshment and codependency, and how to reclaim our identity after coercive control. Ending a relationship where there is enmeshment and codependency is very difficult. And although in the previous episodes I give examples related to romantic relationships, this can happen to anyone who is in a high control environment where their personal identity is stripped away from them or not even allowed to develop fully to begin with. But before I talk about empowerment, I would like to define two terms: enmeshment and codependency. These terms are often used interchangeably in the psychological and psychotherapeutic practice. However, even scientifically, a lack of consistency, much controversy, and misunderstanding has been found in using and distinguishing both terms. Initially related to substance abuse treatment, over the years, codependency has often been associated with addiction and defined as a drive for total surrender and loss of oneself. All in all, codependency can be seen as a dysfunctional style of relating to others and an umbrella term that links to four behavioral patterns: external focusing, self-sacrifice, interpersonal conflict and control, and emotional constraint. With enmeshment, there is less the association with addiction and a bigger focus on a consequential phenomenon that develops within specific relationship dynamics. These are associated with three behavioral patterns: confusion of a person's separateness from others, a diminished sense of self resulting in impaired autonomy, and disregard for one's own thoughts, feelings, and needs. All of these can be related to interpersonal conflict and needs for control, approval seeking and self-sacrifice, emotional suppression and subjugation, and perfectionism. Authors suggest that in order to break strong enmeshment in a relationship, one should progressively develop a higher and stronger sense of self. But what happens when strong enmeshment in a relationship is suddenly ripped apart? Then the pain is almost unbearable, and reintegration in society feels simultaneously like a rebirth and a mourning of the self, as if you were quitting a drug cold turkey. That is why it is so difficult to cut it off, and why the cutting of these ties can truly feel like a death. Personally speaking, when I look back now, I realize that the feeling of desperation that I thought felt like dying wasn't the feeling of death. It was the feeling of being born again. The days after I truly started to see closure were the days I realized how much I had self-inflicted blindness. I had flashes of lucid sight where I began to see the world more clearly without a veil blurring my vision. I felt cold and naked during most of those summer days, and at times I wondered if I would always feel as vulnerable as I did at that moment. I could crack at any time. Any word or look from anyone would make tears build up inside my sockets and a billed lump twist inside my throat. And during those flashes of reality hitting me right in the face, I could really see it. The cold sensation of being naked in a brand new world, the establishment of a new perspective, the recognition of a whole other dimension making me feel like a newborn emerging into a world filled with the unknown. Freedom, 1,000 possibilities, and permission to be that girl I had always seen other girls being. The kind of girl who takes time to feel things, to explore the world, and pursue her passions. So that's what I did. I tried to fake it till I made it. I ripped out every last bit of self that could remind me of that girl I had been for years and years. I would put my earphones in, choose some music that could set the mood for the rest of the day, listen to it on loop, and try to romanticize my life. Even that was unfathomable for me. Yet I tried. One of the most important things to do to deprogram yourself from the narrative your abusers convince you to believe about yourself is to do the things you want to do but are afraid of doing. As a matter of fact, psychology suggests that acting powerful leads to feeling empowered. Remember, I had grown with social anxiety and in a house of glass. I was forbidden from going to sleepovers, to the park with friends, to birthday parties, or to the movies, or doing anything outside of the house besides being followed around by my mother and stepfather. And one of my first contacts with the outside world was that first year of college where I wasn't really allowed to do much because I had to work for my parents in between classes. And after that, a relationship that was toxic and controlling too. So this required proper reprogramming of the mind. By the end of that relationship, I was truly just a carcass of the person that I was supposed to be. I knew that I had to jump in the cold water regardless of being afraid of the change of states, because ultimately, I was alone in my struggle and I was afraid of everything and everyone. So I had to do something about it. And as much as I wanted to just fade into oblivion, something in me did not let me do it. I guess if I had just put an end to it, I would have let everyone who had ever hurt me win. And as a naturally highly competitive person, I could not let that happen. So I did what I had to do. I grabbed every opportunity I could to leave the house and socialize and do things that totally put me out of my comfort zone. I tried to travel as much as I could. I forbade myself from recoiling in my own shell and gave myself the gift of surrounding myself with people instead. This is actually a very important step in the context of social reinsertion after abuse. Surrounding ourselves with people in the initial stages is essential in order to rebuild trust, learn healthy relationship dynamics, grow a new sense of belonging, and build a support network. As an alternative of staying at home and crying, I drove myself to the beach and watched the waves. I spent the weekend at a former teammate's house. I ate food that I hadn't been allowed to eat before. I tried wine, beers, and took a rest day from anything work-related. I planned to spend a day without feeding my workout addiction. I changed my car so I wouldn't be recognized in the small town. I made it a point to visit my grandma more often. I started listening to different music genres, trying to figure out what I liked. I started catching up on a lifetime of pop news, TV shows, and movies that I had always heard of and never really watched. I went to a concert in Belgium, spent a week in Luxembourg at a friend's house, flew to Milan for a day, spent Christmas by the Mediterranean Sea, then took a train by myself to a gym in the middle of semi-rural Italy. I got a tattoo and I cut my hair, 50 centimeters of it to be exact. Making drastic changes can help disrupt toxic behavioral and thought patterns, create physical and emotional distance from the false identity built during the time of abuse, discovering new possibilities, and developing self-esteem and a new relationship with yourself. And my heart was broken every day. In fact, my heart was breaking every day, but it was also healing. I didn't see the healing at the time. I just saw the hurt and the mourning. But looking back now, I see that that's where the healing began. Now, fast forward 4 years from those days, I am still healing. I still have a lot to learn. And honestly, I think that's beautiful. In the past, I was accused of being controlling and dependent. Reality is, I was never those things. When we are abused, we are the ones being groomed into dependency. All I ever aspired to have in a relationship is closeness, sharing moments and adventures, challenging each other, without suffocation, control, or depersonalization. I never aspired to lose my own identity, but to actually get a sense of magnification of who I am, to find someone who could challenge me and recognize my worth. For years, I thought I had known what being loved felt like, but the following weeks after that day of the breakup, I quickly realized that I had mistaken toxicity for love. So no, not one day after that day did I ever feel any type of homesickness for the life I had left behind. Not because I had been faking it for the previous years, but because you can't really feel homesick for a place that isn't your home. On the next episode, I will discuss finding ourselves, deprogramming, and facing big fears. Thank you for listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. See you soon, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Ego Next Door. And if you would like to support my work, consider becoming a patron to my Patreon creator page at Jennifer Hachia. The Ego Next Door podcast is presented solely for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The content here is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Reliance on any information provided here is at your own risk. If you or someone you know is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please reach out immediately to someone who can help right away. Call your national emergency services or go to the nearest hospital.